Essential Self-Care Podcast, a podcast for those of us who are, let's face it, too busy for self-care. In this podcast, you will hear real life stories from people who leaned into their self-care as they were navigating life's storms. You'll learn practical tips, tools, and strategies to incorporate self-care into your own busy life as well. You'll hear from expert guests sharing their expertise on specific tools and modalities of self-care to optimize your well-being in your life, career, and relationships. I'm your host, Dr. Sheetal Ajmani. I am a physician, best-selling author, and founder of Radiant Living Institute, where I guide high-achieving women to get unstuck and learn to live radiantly again through major life transitions. Quick disclaimer before we dive into the episode, please know that this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Always seek the advice of your own health practitioner or mental health provider for your specific situation. Now, let's get started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Essential Self-Care Podcast. I am really excited about today's guest. We connected over LinkedIn and I was just like instantly drawn to her profile. I was like, can we schedule a chat? And we scheduled a chat and I was like, I really want to have you on my show. So I'm so grateful she is here with us today. Today's guest is Mindy Peterson. Mindy Peterson is the host of the Enhance Life with Music podcast, where she explores how music makes our lives better. Through interviews with her guests, she spotlights practical ways that music impacts our health, happiness, and wholeness in areas as varied as science and health, sports and entertainment, business, and education. Her show has downloads in over 130 countries, is in Listen Score's top 5% of global podcasts. In addition, Mindy is a nationally certified teacher of music. She is the Arts Advocacy Chair of the Minnesota Music Teachers Association and a member of Music Teachers National Association. A self-motivated lifelong learner, her passions include music, health and wellness, and education. Today, Mindy is going to share a bit about what she's learned along the way as a curator of music experts with regards to music as a self-care modality. Welcome to the show, Mindy.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I am honored to be here and a big self-care fan. So thanks for having the show and bringing me on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You know, Mindy, music has played such a big role in my own life. I am not a musician. I do not play any musical instruments, but I am definitely a listener of music, and music has played such an important role during just various aspects of my life. And I think many of us can relate to just the power that music and sounds can have of it can take us back to moments in time in our life, even like decades before. Like there's just so much power in it. It can change how we feel. Like I think most everyone has at least a felt experience when they think about music, whether it's a particular song or a particular genre of music. But there's also a lot of science around, the benefits of music. And you have had, when we got on a phone call and chatted a few weeks ago, you described yourself as really sort of a curator of the music experts. You bring on all of these experts on your show and you interview them and you get to talk with them and you get to ask them questions and you get to pick their brains about, as I mentioned in the introduction, all different aspects of music, how it affects health, wellness, but also like business and education. And I realize this might be kind of an unfair question to start off with, Mindy, because you've been doing your show since 2019. You have over 187 episodes. But if you were to go back and think about what are some of the key pieces or key information and expertise that you have gleaned that have really stuck with you throughout all these episodes that you've done, all these experts that you've spoken to, that you'd like to share with our listeners today about music as it relates to self-care and wellness?
Yeah, that is a tough question. And I just want to quick before I answer your question, go back to something that you just mentioned. And you said something about how music has played such an important role in your life, even though you don't consider yourself to be a musician. And that's one thing that I like to talk about so much on the show is you don't have to be someone that you don't have to consider yourself to be a musician or have extensive knowledge of music, like technical aspects of music or anything like that, to appreciate and enjoy music and experience the benefits of music. So that's one thing that is a beautiful thing about how music can enhance our lives, is that it works for everybody, whether
Yeah.
you're a musician or not. And
Absolutely.
the
Don't ask me anything about technical aspects, chords, or anything like that, but I know what it makes me how it makes me feel.
yeah,
And I know how it touches me on a really deep level. It's almost even hard to explain, but it just touches me on a really deep level. So I know how it makes me feel. I know how it touches me and impacts me. But yeah, don't ask me about any of the technical aspects.
sure, sure. And certainly the more we know and understand, the more we can appreciate, but it works for everybody, which is a beautiful thing. But in answering your question, I guess one way I could answer that is to look at the number of episodes that tend to fall into a certain category. So I'll back up and explain a little bit. Once I got to a certain number of episodes, like maybe 100, I thought, this is getting to be a lot for people to kind of sort through if they're just looking through the episodes and trying to decide where to start if they're new to the podcast. And I thought all of these episodes tend to fall into one of four categories. One would be science and health. One is education and community. One is business, and one is sports and entertainment. So I thought I'm just going to include a link under the archives to these four categories so that people can just search by category, because sometimes people are just really interested in how can I use music for healing, whether it's pain management or maybe they're dealing with Parkinson's or MS or cancer or things like that. They have a diagnosis of some sort, then they could just easily jump to that. Or maybe they're educators. I work in my day job with a lot of music educators and educators in general. And maybe they want to know, how can music training affect learning in other areas? Or how does music training affect the developing child's mind? Or how does music enhance community? Things like that. They can just go to that link and so forth. So when I go back and look at the number of episodes that I have in each of these categories, by far and away, science and health is the biggest category. And so I do really have an affinity for the topic of healing, and holistic health and self-care certainly falls under that topic. So within that category is definitely being high on my interest level. Within that, in terms of things that the episodes and guests and topics that really have resonated with me and impacted me, I think it's a combination of guests who really have a powerful personal story that they're sharing that just hits you between the eyes, and you think about it and never forget the story that they share. And then a second type of topic or guest that really sticks in my mind are the ones that have special personal meaning for me. I think of some of the parenting related topics, or brain development, pain management, healing, how music can affect our overall wellness, how music affects dementia and Alzheimer's prevention. I have a grandfather who died of Alzheimer's, so that's something that's kind of close to me. Topic like why we love sad music and what sad music can do for us. Hearing experts who have PhDs and can explain why do we have this intense reaction to sad music, and why does it feel good? It seems counterintuitive that listening to sad music would make us feel good, but it does.
I'm curious. So what came out of that
Yeah.
episode?
Yeah. So I actually have a couple sort of episodes relating to different aspects of it. But part of it is we realize we're not alone. Somebody wrote this song and we feel like they could be telling our story. and what they're saying. And so you realize you're not alone. Another reason that it can really be helpful, it has to do with the brain. And I have a lot of neurologists, neuroscientists, doctors, medical professionals who come on the show talking about various aspects of music and neurology. But one person came on and he realized he was onto something when he played the music for a gathering of people who had experienced abuse. And he was told going in as a man, a lot of the attendees were women. He said, just so you know, going in, a lot of these women do not want to be touched. So don't, just heads up, don't go up and give them a hug or something like that. And in the course of this convention or conference, he played a song. I'm trying to remember the title of it, but it was Innocent Child, I think is the title of it. And you can kind of imagine what the lyrics were. And he said that when he finished, there were women lined up to give him a hug and just tears streaming down their face. And the comment that he kept hearing that told him, okay, I need to dig into this more and find out what just happened. But the comment he kept hearing was, the words in your lyrics are words that my loved ones have been telling me for years. I've been reading them for years, but somehow when it was combined in a song, combined with melody, it hit deeper. And I was finally able to really integrate these truths, and it got below the surface. So stories like that, just give me chills. And I feel like people need to be made aware of the power of music and how it can enhance their lives.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. That is really fascinating. And when you were describing some of that, goodness, there's so many things that kind of came through my mind. I've been doing some work, in addition to the work that I do with Radiant Living Institute, as well as my podcast, Essential Self-Care. I also serve as the medical advisor for a nonprofit foundation, which is actually somewhat through that is sort of how we connected.
Yeah.
Because the work that I'm doing with the nonprofit organization is that we are seeking to transform the healthcare experience through the arts, through the healing arts, music being a form of the healing arts. And we actually, as the medical advisor, I helped curate a medical conference earlier this year and the theme of that conference was music as medicine. And so, we heard from music therapists as well as some physicians who are integrating music into their practices. And so just the stories, and I think, as humans, we learn so much and we retain so much from stories. I get, that emotional connection. We relate to it a lot better. And so those stories that I heard through the conference is really what stuck with me. Just so many different stories of how music can help in various situations for people who are, again, thinking back to that specific conference, for people who are navigating medical diagnoses as well as caregivers, and really all of us, but specifically, in that conference, we were looking at how music relates in those specific situations. And then I was also thinking, I have a colleague of mine who I met at a medical conference about 2 years ago, and she is also a violinist. And so she integrates music and has done a lot of work with music and veterans and PTSD.
Sure.
And so there's so much to that. Something else that really resonated, though, was when you shared those episodes with kind of like, why do we resonate so much with sad music and why does it make us feel so good? And just that idea of like, at least one of the reasons being that it helps us realize that we're not alone. And I think that's so powerful. And that made me think of sort of my own experiences with music. I love listening to music kind of all the time, really. I pretty much always have some sort of something going on in the background sort of all day long. But I especially enjoy going to see live music. And part of that is that there's this fluidity, right? It's completely live. You're completely in the moment. The only people experiencing that are the people who are with you in that room or outdoors if it's an outdoor festival, right? In that moment. And it's this like special moment that you're sharing with all of these people too. And at the same time, we all have our, there's this combined experience, and at the same time, we all have our individual experience of it. Quick shout out to today's sponsor, Reclaim Your Radiance, Radiant Living Institute's signature coaching program designed to help you reclaim your worth, renew your energy, and restore your happiness in your life, career, and relationships. This 6-module curriculum has already helped countless women rediscover themselves through life's storms. From setting difficult boundaries within toxic relationships to finding their inner strength and power while navigating divorce and co-parenting, to aligning their career and business with their authentic self, and to learning how to live for themselves again after their kids have left the nest. This program has been a guiding force for women to live unapologetically and shine brightly within their lives once again, or often, even for the first time ever. Experience the results for yourself. Head over to radiantlivinginstitute.com/reclaim your radiance to learn more and get started.
Totally. Yeah, music is an incredible bonding agent. It's kind of like social glue. And relationships are so integral to personal satisfaction and contentment and happiness. More and more studies are showing that. And so, yeah, it's incredibly helpful for that. And when you talked about the live music, at some point I realized going to live concerts, particularly for me, classical music tends to just it feels like a massage for my brain. I just by the time I walk out of there, I just feel like my brain has been massaged into this state of homeostasis. It's like the kinks have been worked out. I would like to do some more research and digging into what exactly that is that's going on. I don't know if it's a result of the vibrations or what it is, but yeah, live music has the ability to have that effect for me personally in a way that recorded music doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. For me, there's been so many times in my life, during different times of my life too, where I've gone to a live music show and I came out of it just like, I know earlier I was like, I don't know exactly even how to describe it. And the best way I have is that sometimes I'll come out of a show and just be like, my soul needed that. Like that just
Mm,
felt so good. Like my soul needed that.
sure.
It hits me on such a deep level.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it, actually. I haven't heard of it put that way, but I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love also kind of going back to how you were describing your show and how you went back and you kind of categorized them into these
Yeah.
4 categories: science and health, education and community, business, sports and entertainment. And I just wanted to highlight that again because yes, this podcast is it's called Essential Self-Care. We're looking at more topics related to kind of self-care, that sort of science, health, wellness aspect of it. But a lot of my listeners work in the healthcare field. A lot of my listeners are also entrepreneurs, and a lot of my listeners are creatives, or educators. And so I really like that you pointed out that you have sort of archived your episodes in this way so that it's really easy. So for anyone who's listening right now, whichever one of those sort of categories resonates with you the most, knowing that there's an easy way to find some episodes with Mindy and some experts who, she has had the opportunity to speak with there. Um,
Yes.
and I would be curious, kind of backtracking here a little bit more. And I know you shared this with me a little bit when we chatted offline
Yeah.
a few
Yeah.
weeks ago. But I think kind of as we're starting to sort of wrap up this episode, I would love to know sort of what led you to create this podcast in the first place.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have always been fascinated by reading or hearing in the news about ways, sort of non conventional, maybe unexpected ways that music enhances our life, how music makes it better. For example, 10, 11, 12 years ago, I don't know if you remember, Gabby Giffords was a rep from Arizona who survived an assassination attempt. She was shot and had traumatic brain injuries as a result of that shooting. She had aphasia and needed to relearn how to speak. And in the news, I remember reading just this little blurb in a bigger article, this little paragraph about how she was relearning how to speak through music therapy. And I thought, wait, you need to donate a bigger chunk of this article to that. Like, what's that about? So I dug into it and found out that sure enough, it was music therapy that allowed her brain to create these new neural pathways around, kind of as a detour around the damaged areas of her brain. And that's how she relearned how to speak. And I actually, one of my very first episodes of the podcast, I interviewed her music therapist who worked with her. And she just explained, kind of how that happens neurologically and medically, how they can use music in this way. So I would read things about that, or read articles about how music training impacts children's ability to learn in other areas, or how it makes us more learning a second language or a third language, or how music memory is the last to fade away, and people with dementia could be virtually unresponsive, not recognizing loved ones, not communicative, nonverbal, and they can hear a song that was important to them in their youth, and it just gives you goosebumps to watch them literally come alive. And obviously it's not a long-term cure. It doesn't last, forever, but for a couple hours or even just 20 minutes, they have that quality of life back. Their loved ones have them back. So I remember seeing all these disparate areas, articles relating to how music could affect us in all these various areas, and thinking, as music educators and musicians, it's job security for us to make sure people know about this. And it's a public service, because these are truly ways that music makes our lives better. And a lot of people, I just don't think, are aware of them. So fast forward to when podcasts became a thing, and I was instantly hooked as soon as I discovered podcasts, and thought this is the perfect medium to showcase these different ways that music impacts our lives. And there's got to be a podcast that's doing this. And so I went on a hunt for that podcast, could not find it. And that's why I ended up starting the podcast.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that journey with us. And through that, also sharing so many, just fascinating stories and wide array of stories of how music can impact our lives in so many different ways and in so many different facets of our lives. So for anyone who's listening right now, where can they, because obviously there's so much that we can dive really deep in this, which is why you've been producing your show since 2019 and you have over 187 episodes and 4 different categories of general topic areas. So for someone who wants to dive deeper, where can they learn more about your show and the work that you're doing?
Sure. My website is the best place to go, mpetersonmusic.com. And if you add the /podcast, that will take you right to the podcast. But if you just go to mpetersonmusic.com, you can easily click on the podcast tab. If you go to the menu and click archives after you go to that podcast tab, that will give you all of the episodes, but also the link to directly go to one of those 4 categories that you're interested in going to. So if you have more of an interest in science and health, or education and community, whatever it is, you can just go directly to that. And in terms of digging in, I would say just scan the topic titles and see what looks interesting, and just start listening to some. They're all evergreen content. So they're not tied to a certain date like a news show would be. So yeah, and within the show notes of each episode, there's always lots of links to dig deeper if you really want to. If you listen to one and think, ooh, this really resonates with me. It's about how music can be used for speech development, and my kid is dealing with those issues. You can always dig deeper by following the links and resources in the show notes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I will include those links in my show notes here to this episode. And I have already tuned into a few episodes and I'm excited to dive deeper into it as well. So thank you for the work that you're doing and keep it going. And thank you again for being here today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Essential Self-Care Podcast. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a positive review, and share this episode with someone you know. And remember, your free guide, 6 simple yet powerful steps to create your radiant life, is waiting for you at radiantlivinginstitute.com. Download it today.